Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Michael Roviello. This is the Own Your Health podcast by Optimyze. I'm here with a special guest and friend, Anton Mackey. We're going to talk about all things brotherhood, life, yoga, cold plunging, Wim Hof method, breath work, so many different topics to go over today. So I'm excited to get into this with you. Before we dive in, I just want to give everybody a quick bio so they can know a little bit more about you. And then we will go down the rabbit hole. So Anton Mackey is a sacred son, father, and husband. He's been on a journey of self-mastery and spiritual exploration for as long as he can remember. Inspired by physical fitness at a young age, Anton received his degree in exercise physiology and has been teaching yoga for over 13 years. He's become a teacher of teachers and has had the privilege of traveling around the globe teaching yoga students at yoga studios, festivals, retreat centers. He has created his own yoga style that is both structured and fluid, uniting the divine feminine and sacred masculine. He is a men's work facilitator with Sacred Sons, which is a giant organization that's exploding really all over the United States and beyond, and has created his own empowerment coaching program, which we will learn more about today. His teaching and coaching philosophy is inspired by multiple disciplines and traditions, empowering his clients and students to take greater ownership and responsibility for their lives while having self-mastery of their emotions. His mission is to inspire others to live with greater awareness, intention, clarity, and precision so they can own their power and consciously create a better reality. That's beautiful. Well said, well written. Thank you so much for being on here today. So let's open it up. Anton, there's so much I don't know about you, which is interesting because, you know, we've been in the same network and same circle for over 3 years now. I met you upon the birth of Optimyze in Arcadia, and you came on board and really started helping us out as an ambassador and a friend. And so I've gotten to know you over the years, but there's a lot I don't know about you. So let's start with where'd you grow up? You know, where are you from? Sure. What was life like in your early years? We're the same age, 43, class of 97. Yeah, born in 79. So
so I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I grew up as an only child. I had lower middle class upbringing of tons of privilege. I had everything I could ever imagine, especially love and support from my parents, nice. Which, that was really great. What I did lack was an understanding of what it meant to be a man and masculinity. So that kind of carried on into my teens and my 20s and my 30s until I finally started to understand what that truly meant in my late 30s. I was into sports, primarily gymnastics is what's kind of kicked me off, understanding and learning and loving about the body and how it moves. Being a smaller, I always joke, a petite guy, gymnastics was very fitting. Did that from a young age, from 10 to 15, and then got on and played soccer in high school and didn't really go far with that. And then ended up moving out to ASU with the goal to be a physical therapist and got my degree in exercise physiology at ASU. And then dove into right away a great opportunity to work with athletes and fitness clients. So I was doing fitness training and sports conditioning training right out of college. This awesome place called Fit Life, and did that for several years, 12 years, I believe, before I hung up those cleats, if you would say that, and started really full time with the yoga, teaching yoga.
So early years, Albuquerque, New Mexico, what was life like out there? Were you just an athlete, hanging in the suburbs, in the city?
Albuquerque's small enough that
it's a tough town.
Could be. Yeah, I grew up, in the 90s where there was like a lot of gang violence. There's graffiti all over the walls. I developed some fear. I'm not still trying to identify where this fear came from. And I always had a fear, and I can't even identify what that fear was. Maybe being kidnapped or getting jumped or whatever it was. And that kind of carried with me. And that was kind of my motivator to get out of Albuquerque. My high school life was great. I was in this very diverse high school, lower income, awesome people. I got involved with student government and was class vice president for many years, played on the soccer team, was very involved in high school. I did the whole high school life and I loved it. And my school was great, and the people I was surrounded by were awesome because there's a lot of diversity, which was great. And then I wanted to get out and go try some bigger, better things, what I thought were better, maybe not necessarily the truth, but I went to ASU with the intention to just have fun. And I did. I got my degree in exercise physiology while also joining a fraternity, which kind of was not on the plan originally. My dad actually didn't even want me to join a fraternity. He asked me not to, and I granted his wish the first semester. But then I found a fraternity, a friend of mine, a guy, Jason Bradford. He was the person who introduced me to the fraternity, and he was black man. So having that was kind of like my father felt more comfortable. Oh, there's some diversity here. It's not just a bunch of white rich guys. And I met lots of diverse people in my fraternity, especially people with the Jewish faith. And so that was great. I had a great group of friends in college. And what I discovered just recently, as I've gotten more involved in men's work, I've been sitting in what we call men's circles since college. We would have our fraternity chapter meetings, and we'd sit in a circle, sit in the chapter room and pass the gavel and share. And I remember the really deep shares that us young college guys who were trying to figure out what it meant to be men had, where guys would cry and we'd laugh and we'd argue and we'd fight, and it would all come up. And it was this space for vulnerability. And I didn't even realize I had that until 20 years later, where I'm now deep in what we call the men's work, a part of Sacred Sons, and we're doing the same thing. And no wonder it felt so comfortable for me, because I've been doing it my whole life.
Men's work's getting really popular. Obviously, I've seen an explosion of that on social media channels and different people I know within my own network getting involved. I think it's a great movement. It's really interesting because I'm seeing a lot of men's work and a lot of women's work. And yeah, I mean, if you really look at society and culture here in the West, they don't really have those types of environments, those rites of passage that our ancestors did, or maybe Native American communities did at one time as well. So it is an interesting movement that is happening, and this idea of how to be a man and how to also trust other men is really an interesting concept. You know, I went through some of that experience with my time in the military, which was a kind of a different version of it, and we can talk about both good and bad. There's definitely a lot of pros to it for sure, and there's definitely maybe some bad things I picked up along the way. But yeah, I see you're very deeply involved in that movement. You're doing a great job. All the people that have had experience with you have really good things to say. But I also want to talk a little bit about your yoga career, because you are really well known in the yoga community. Like, everybody knows you in the yoga community. You've done an outstanding job of just creating a really good, positive reputation for being a great teacher, for being like a really good yogi, and ultimately helping people in so many different ways in that form. So how the hell did you get from, I'm going to take my first yoga class to where you are today, which is really kind of a big name here in Arizona?
Well, thanks. Yeah. And first I'll touch on the fact that, yes, I'm fortunate. There are some people who see me in this beautiful light, and they see what I'm here and what my real intention is. But I also understand and recognize that not everyone's going to see me that way. And that's a stage in my life I'm in where I'm realizing maybe not everyone sees that version of me, and that's okay. And possibly because I'm no different than who I was. I just behave differently than who I was. I think that I heard that recently on a podcast, and I really loved it. Like, who I was in my 20s, who I was in my teens, who I was in my 30s. It wasn't a different version of me, same heart, right? I just behaved differently, and I've learned and grown from that space. Now, what made me find yoga, where I found yoga, was for stress relief. This has been shared on many podcasts before, how I found yoga. I was 2008, 4th of July. Oh my God, 4th of July, 2008. It's almost there. This weekend, I was out in Utah with some buddies hiking the Zion. We were hiking the Narrows, and we had with us some psilocybin mushrooms, and we were experiencing expansion of awareness and presence within nature. And we took the mushrooms there, or not took, we sat with and communed with the spirit of the mushroom while hiking and enjoying nature. And after our trip on the way home, we were driving home, I was sitting passenger with a buddy, and we got pulled over. and what I believe we were profiled for how we looked, hat backwards, tattoos, whatever it was. And the guy was putting pressure on us, and I had let like a tiny bit of like crumbs of mushrooms left in a bag. But because I just felt the need to be honest when he was kind of putting the pressure and asking if we were doing drugs or any things, I told him that I had this in my car. And he then proceeded to arrest me and let me know that it's a felony charge in Utah to possess psilocybin mushrooms. And I got taken in a cop car back to a little town called Kanab, Utah, where I got put in a little jail cell and had to come up with a very hefty bond or bail to get out, which was kind of strange just for what I had. And I'm sure if I would have had a better lawyer and had different things, I could have fought it differently, but that's not here nor there. It's actually was just part of the path. So after getting out that day and then going through the whole process of like what was really happening with a lawyer, with a felony charge, having to go to court in Utah, I was just stressed in my head, couldn't sleep. And a friend of mine named Tessa, she was working at a yoga studio. And again, I was a fitness trainer at the time, and I didn't see any need for extra stretch other than you do before you lift weights. And she said, come try a yoga class. And I did. And on August 14th, 2008, I took a class at One Yoga. Shout out to Ian and Vanessa, who had At One Yoga, who are the owners of Spiritual Gangster. And I took a class with a woman named Johanna Epps, and I was taken away. I did a side body stretch. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is where spirituality meets physicality. And I was like, I found it in one class. And then it became an addiction. I was going twice a week, 4 times a week, twice a day.
Wow. And
I was very dedicated to the practice. And everyone's like, oh yeah, sure, you're just doing yoga, whatever. And it became my thing. And because that night I slept with a little less worry because it helped me calm my mind. So like a lot of people will find yoga for the physical and then explore the spiritual that comes with it. Yeah. It was the opposite for me. It was like, oh yeah, the physical's cool and I see how it works out. But really it was about what it did for the calming of my nervous system, my mind. And then I just got involved. And very early on, I was discovered by Vanessa Lee of Spiritual Gangster and At One. She saw me practicing in class and she asked if I was a teacher. And I was only like 3 months into my practice. I said, no. She said, well, you're going to do our teacher training program. And they put me through the program and I had really great mentors, John Salisbury, Alex Austin, Jen Chiarelli, Cheryl Alver, a lot of really great teachers who still teach here in the Valley today. They were my teachers in that program. And right away, it just stuck. I just knew it. It reminded me of creating a gymnastics routine, a floor routine, where you're doing like a tumbling pass and your handstand and this stuff. So creating sequences just worked. And then I had the anatomical understanding in the background of which muscles are doing what and how to position the body appropriately and how to cue people in that. And knowing the body and being comfortable in the body just made it real easy for me. And then I was discovered by other studios and festivals, and then that's kind of how it happened. And really the keys to the yoga castle were kind of handed over to me when a yoga teacher left the community, and I was given a lot of classes, primetime slots, you'd call it. And that's kind of where it took me. And then I was traveling around quite a bit. Yeah, and that's kind of where it took me.
What a nice ride. That's actually a really cool story because,
thanks.
You get to find something that you love just in that one class, and then all of a sudden it becomes a practice, helps you personally, and then becomes a career. And it's been a great career for you so far. And now I know that you're transitioning into other work, but still doing your yoga practice. I know that you're still teaching locally in different studios and retreats. But the men's work seems like it's a big kind of driving motivator for, your current life based on,
for sure,
our conversations and what I see externally looking in through the eyes of social media. You're deeply involved in that. So what's attracted you so much to this kind of work, and what's going on in these circles? Like, what are you seeing? What kind of breakthroughs? What's happening? What kind of people are showing up? There's just so much to talk about there.
Yeah, there is. And it's great. So for me, it was, I was brought on with Sacred Sons. I was there from the beginning. I saw the whole thing happen with the 3 original men who started it. They were friends. I met them. I watched the process happen. And I was brought on to teach yoga at the first Convergence, which is their retreat. And it started off, pretty typical. You had this certain type of guy who was there, the kind of yoga dude who has the beard and the braided hair and the tattoos. And that was kind of like the guys who felt comfortable for it. But if you went to a Sacred Sons event right now, you would see something completely different. Extreme diversity. We have trans men, we have gay men, we have every race, Native American cultures you can even imagine. It is inclusive to everybody, and it's beautiful. What drew me into it is it showed me how insecure and uncomfortable I was in the presence of really powerful embodied men. And it was a lot of discomfort every time I went there, checking in with, do I feel valuable? And constantly searching for validation, which has been an issue for me most of my life, especially when you don't feel like a man, being very small, being very, as I say, petite. I went through puberty very late. Like, I still can't even grow a beard. When my hair comes in, it's gray, but it can't even grow in full. It's hilarious. So I never felt very much like a man. And then what I was taught about masculinity was that it was all unhealthy. Mm-hmm. That was what was taught to me. That you play football, you own a gun, you own a truck, you're just a meathead and gorilla and an ape and all these things. And so I had this distorted view. So I only felt comfortable in the presence of women. Because what I discovered is that's the only way I felt like a man, was in the presence of a woman or a girl. And that was the big challenge for me, is when I stepped into being in the presence of really talented, amazing, embodied men. And it was like, oh, it's time. And now I was on a hike in one of the retreats I was at recently, an embodied masculine experience with Sacred Sons. And I was looking around at the men I was with, and I said, oh my God, it's the first time in my life where I'd rather be around a bunch of men than a bunch of women. And that felt so great that I felt that comfortable. And the vulnerability that, there are some beautiful concepts and philosophies that have gone into Sacred Sons, really about ownership and responsibility. And that's what I think the men's work, why it's taking off, is we're ready as men to take greater ownership and responsibility for our part in all of it, and how we can change ideas. For me, my driving force was, let's really define what it is to be a man, because I'm very sensitive and I'm in touch with my feminine side. That also can be part of what masculinity is. And my sons, my boys, they need to see that in me. They need to see that I can cry, that I'm in touch with my emotions. They need to see a softer side of me. They also need to see a side of me that's new, which is very structured and very, what you would call the protector or the provider. I kind of shy away from the word protector. We can get into that later, but the idea of what we typically think a man to be, and I'm understanding what that is through embodiment and through really facing aspects of myself that I've neglected for a long time or just felt insecure about, and now feeling comfortable and having a group of men to basically call me in and say, hey, you're welcome here. All of you is welcome. And, everyone's expressing the masculinity a little bit different. And I've always been really interested in the dynamics of the feminine and the masculine, which has created different yoga practices. I got to be part of a creation of a certain yoga practice called Primal Flow, which is all about masculine and feminine. I realized that's what I do when I teach. I bring in both elements. And that's what my current style of yoga, which I call functional flow, where there's this structure, but then there's also fluidity. And when that comes together, we have flow. And that's kind of where my whole yoga has always been, about finding that beautiful balance, knowing that I can tap into the feminine, but then what it actually feels like to be masculine, because that's new to me. That's new in my life. And as a father, I think that's why I have sons, is because it was like, okay, you're going to learn for yourself what it means to be a man, so that you can teach these boys all the different ways that you can be a man.
That's real talk right there. I mean, there's very few people that are going to be as open, as honest as you are about your experiences and how you feel. I learned much later in my life that vulnerability is power. For many years, I showed people the side of myself that I wanted them to see. So it was very easy to kind of paint this picture that I wanted them to see. And a lot of the softer things inside of me were things that I kept inside, and I didn't show or showed very, very few people. And then I realized that, well, we're attracted to people who can be vulnerable, who can self-express, who can be their true selves. And that's a lot of power. And that's why we're so drawn to that kind of energy. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you just being that honest about how you feel. And I'm sure there was a process that you went through in order to be this open so casually about these things. Because a lot of people think that. A lot of people feel the same way that you do. A lot of men do. But they sure the hell won't say it. So
yeah, and that's what we're experiencing with Sacred Sons. Or these men are waiting to feel, to show that they can feel, to be in a space, to be held, to feel. And there's a beautiful aspect that's really kind of come about with Sacred Sons, and it's what we call ritual confrontation or ritual combat. And it's bringing two men together to box or to wrestle or to grapple, because what we've discovered is we all know this, right? The issue's in the tissue. It's in our physical body where we're holding on to our stuff. And we can talk about it all day, and I'm good at talking about it. But when you get a man to be in his body and being against another man with resistance, stuff comes up in a very beautiful way, in a raw way. And to know that you can be in a space where you're going to get hit, but not because someone wants to hurt you or defeat you, because they want to uplift you and they want to help you step into greater power, to step into greater embodiment.
Yeah, that's a very healthy way.
All the transformation happens. It's been incredible. And I'm, much hats off to Sacred Sons and the guys there who brought that forth, who's really stepped that up into being like, hey, we got to get physical. The physical is what brings it about, which, I experienced through yoga in a very feminine way. Let's go ahead and move the body and stretch and then open this up. And then a lot of stuff, and that's why people have those releases in yoga, because they're tapping into the stuff in their body. You know that. Same thing with breath work, right? We're moving energy. And in Sacred Sons, we realize there's a way to move energy, and physically, you get punched in the face, energy's going to move in some way. Or for those people who, have some trauma, because we all have some sort of trauma, right? But it allows that trauma to be brought up. So then you're not playing into the trauma. Like the trauma binds us to our trauma. The trauma bound theory is that we're playing out our experience now based on our past. And what this does is it brings up, oh, this is how I used to feel about it. And now I can change that story, right? So we step out of victimhood mentality, which, the world clearly needs right now, is to step out of victimhood mentality and to take greater ownership and responsibility. And that's not fun. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it in really uncomfortable ways myself.
It's a low vibration for sure to blame things on others. It's one of the things that came about in my journey was to take 100% responsibility at all times when things are going well. And obviously when things are going poorly, even though they were outside of my control, some way, somehow I manifested this scenario to occur, and there's a lesson there, and I need to look through it. I look at pain in my body the same way, because ultimately that's how I got into personal development, really was through pain, and I didn't understand the mind-body connection. I wasn't aware of that. And once I became aware of that, I realized that psychosomatic pain is, it's a real thing, and our minds can create a lot of pain within our own bodies. And it's just, there's a lot to talk about just in that alone.
Sure.
So I would love to hear more about your experiences with the Sacred Sons in men's groups and men's circles and retreats. And what are people, not having to share anybody's, personal story. I know those things are confidential and done in an honorable way. But what are the trends? What are men dealing with today? What's common? What do you kind of see over and over where you're like, this is like a really common reoccurring thing, regardless of like socioeconomic, race, gender.
Yeah.
Well, not
totally.
gender, but just the basics. What are the common things that you're seeing that men are dealing with today that they're maybe came to try to heal?
First and foremost is the lack of love from a parent, right? Or even worse than that, abuse, physical or emotional abuse from a parent. The stories that I've heard are just unbelievable, breaking of heart, bringing tears to my eyes to witness and see and hear. But so many men who never had that space to be held, to be loved, to be witnessed, to be seen, which then, creates it all. It all stems from that point moving forward. Within Sacred Sons, I will touch on one thing. I wear these shirts to say, I decide. This is my transformational coach, my friend, Kevin Walton, Source Radiance. He has a program called Conscious Creatorhood. And I heard him speak at a Sacred Sons, one of the earlier Sacred Sons retreats, and I was just blown away. He had the dialogue and the words for everything I knew within me to be true. And he had it. And I was just sat there just mesmerized by like, oh my God, this is it. He was the walking embodiment of what I know I can be and I'm stepping into. And through that, that's where the process of like taking ownership and responsibility comes in. And then also recognizing, yes, this stuff happened in your life, but it doesn't have to define you. We're not defined by our past. We don't have to stay in those spaces. We get to decide. We get to choose. We have choice, and choice is freedom. And once we have freedom, we start to recognize, oh, wow, I am creating my own reality. That's the conscious creatorhood. But first you have to have awareness, right? And then it's like, okay, men are drawn to it because they're looking for connection. We all are looking for connection. Now, there's only two things we need. This is a conscious creatorhood thing. We need safety and significance. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, food, water, shelter, right? That's the only thing that's going to keep you alive. You don't have those things, you're not going to survive. But beyond that, it's just safety and significance. So if I feel safe and I feel significant, right, that's how I'm going to thrive in life. But if I don't feel safe, I'll do everything I can to feel comfortable. So I'll search out comfort, right? Whether it's addiction to, you name it.
All kinds.
Staying in my old uncomfortable patterns, and maybe that's having an abusive relationship, maybe that's self-loathing, whatever it is. Okay. And if we don't feel significant, we look for validation. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. This is my story. So if I didn't feel significant, I didn't feel like a man most of my life. I did everything I could to feel significant by getting validation, wanting to hear how great I am, or that I'm worthy, or that someone loves me. But this is the story for all of humanity. And this is why the world is where it is right now, because people don't feel safe and they don't feel significant. And then we behave and act from that, and we get into emotional states from there. So what I see with a lot of men is they don't feel significant, like they're making a difference, and they want to feel connection with someone else and something else, and they know there's more, and they're tired of living the life that is creating their own suffering. Most of the men come with some kind of what we call baggage or trauma or something that they're ready to let go of. And it's not that you let go of it, it's still an aspect of who you are, and you honor that aspect. Oh, this was a version of myself, and I'm going to accept that version of myself, and then now choose to be something more, to step into the more, to access the more, and to create a reality that is more in alignment with truth and love.
What about the relationship? Thank you for sharing. What about the relationships with women? So that's got to be an interesting thing as men start to come into these groups and you get to hear all of these different stories of what they're working through, what they're dealing with. How does that show up in relationships with women?
Oh, I mean, I can speak for myself. I can also speak for just like in general, any relationship where there's a misalignment, where there's control issues, where there's insecurity issues, where there's some sort of abuse or power struggle. It's all rooting back to that safety and significance piece. So what we're seeing with a lot of men is they're recognizing they don't want to repeat the same patterns, the same behaviors, and they don't want to be, sad to say, what their father was. They don't want to be what they've seen men to be, and they're ready to create a new paradigm for what it means to be a partner, to be a lover, to be a husband, to be a friend in general. All relationship.
Upbringing is so interesting. I mean, it's just amazing how what you see in your father, how your father behaves, how your father treats mom, how your father treats the rest of your siblings, how your father treats you, all of those dynamics that are happening when we're young shape so many aspects of our decision making and so many aspects of our life. There's so many. So it's such a precious time period. I heard some statistics, listened to some of Joe Dispenza's work, and he's really into brain waves. And I find that fascinating because, brainwaves is one of those things that you actually have some influence over. And I'm always fascinated in things that you have influence over, because then you can change them and you're not like a victim or controlled by, this unit that you just can't do anything about. And he says that when you're born and you're very young, that basically your brain is in like delta brainwaves. That's why babies sleep so much. So they're basically like just in and out of sleep, consciously awake, super low frequency, and sleep. As they get slightly older, I forget the exact age, maybe like 6 or so, they start to operate more in the theta brainwaves. And theta brainwaves is like that deep meditative state. So a lot of times kids, when they're at their early stage, they almost look drunk, they're always just kind of like looking here, looking there. And they're super suggestible. So they're like sponges. Their brain in that frequency is very suggestible. So they're just basically absorbing their entire environment, everything they see, the communication around them, all those things are starting to shape and create behaviors. And then as they get older, they start to go into the alpha brainwaves, which is more of imagination and curiosity. And then eventually we get to our adult stage, and then we get into the beta brainwaves. And that's where your attention is focused externally. It's on the external environment. And when you're super external and all of your attention is placed externally, there's not a lot of time and focus on internal, being introspective in any sort of way. You're just focusing on the environment world.
There's that whole idea of like, can't teach an old dog new tricks?
I think there's an element
when you're stubborn and old and this is how I am type of mentality.
I think there's an element of that for sure, but as you get higher into the frequency of the beta brainwaves, now you get into the frequency of stress, because if you look at the gap between where beta brainwaves start, between low, mid-range and high, it's actually a big range. And when you get into those high beta frequencies, that's where stress is. That's like when you're in fight or flight. That's where it's like,
sorry,
no worries. There's no time at all for looking inward, self-reflection. You're not going to really absorb really anything. So you're not suggestible at all. That's why if you're ever in like a heated argument with somebody and you're trying to make a point, and you're like both at each other trying to make your point, but you're in that super aroused state of like you're in a stress state, a fight or flight state, you're not receiving anything well. Only until later on, till you really process the argument, until you settle down, will you start to actually have some self-reflection. So that's just kind of an interesting stage of the brain waves in our early development. So really those early years are so important, and we're all shaped so different by our parents.
Totally. And, here's something I just recently heard by a guy I've been listening to a lot, Peter Crone. And he says, people cannot be held accountable for that which they were oblivious to. So yes, I can identify all the things that my dad did and didn't do, and I can blame him and it could be his fault. Yes. This is the way my life is. Or I can be like, well, he was oblivious to it. Can't blame him. So now it's up to me to see that and to choose differently.
That's the best.
And to choose differently.
I had to do that with my father.
It's always choice.
Yeah, my father left when I was young. I think I was 5. He basically just gave up on his responsibilities at an early age. I was 5. My sisters were a little bit older, and my mom was, PTA mom, house mom. We were kind of living a pretty normal life. Lower income as well. He was a bus driver in Queens, New York, and mom didn't work at all. And back then, you can actually
afford a house,
and you can actually raise a family on one, relatively low salary. And he left. And so for many years I had carried that energy. It affected my personal relationships. It affected so many different things in my life. But I went through a training called the Landmark Forum, if you're familiar with that. And that was really good for me because it helped me come to the realization that he was just a guy. He didn't know what he was doing. He was young. He had 4 kids, and and he made some choices, and to this day, he regrets a lot of those choices, but I had to step into pure forgiveness. And to this day, I completely forgive him. I don't hold anything against him at all, but it was the most empowering moment when I had that phone call with him. Great. And I told him that I just, from man to man, I can understand, put myself in his shoes and see that, he wasn't trained and he was treated super shitty by his dad. And that's the one thing I respect about him. He never treated me shitty by any means. He was absent, but he was never mean to me. So
that's cool. That's, there's something, right? You see the positive in that. You did mention something that I want to just share, that I have a point of view on that might be differing. But you said he left his responsibilities. And I heard something, or I came to this understanding that fatherhood is not a responsibility. It's a choice. Because your father realized he had the choice to leave, and he did. But by no means is it a responsibility or a sacrifice, or, basically when you choose fatherhood and to be a father, it just becomes a dedication, a devotion, and a discipline. And for some of us, my greatest purpose, but it was never my responsibility. And that was kind of cool to be like, oh shit, you're responsible for no, I'm not. I could walk out anytime. but I'm not going to and then it shifts to like, but I'm going to make sacrifices for my kids.
Sure.
No, I'm not. I'm going to recognize that being with them, spending time with them, maybe not going to jujitsu as many times as I'd want to go to jujitsu or whatever, is not a sacrifice. It's me making a choice based on a dedication and devotion to something bigger and better than I could have even imagined. And I think that's where fatherhood people can really elevate what it means to be a father, is when you take one, the responsibility out of it, two, the sacrifice, and then make it all about dedication and devotion. And then, man, it's a game changer. And it's been a game changer for me. It is my greatest passion, to be a dad. And that's why I do what I do now. And, a lot of it is just because I love it. It's great. And is it easy? No, but it can be. It can be, and I just had an experience with my son 2 nights ago. He was upset. He's got some stuff. He's 4 years old. And I realized I have to regulate me if I want to regulate him. And regulating me is not telling him to calm down. It's me calming down and me taking the calm, deep breath. And this is the bridge to Optimize for me, man. Thank you guys. Huge thanks to you and Jesse for bringing me in, letting me be a part of it. Because I mentioned this to you, I think yesterday. I have several practices of mine, right? I have a meditation practice, a morning ritual practice. I have my yoga practice, which is primarily teaching at this point. I teach, and that's where I get my yoga, my presence from it. And then I have my jujitsu practice, which I love so much. And then I have my Optimyze practice, my cold plunge practice. And if I had to choose, thank God I don't, I'm so privileged and blessed to be able to have all those things. But if I had to choose, if someone's like, all right, you only get to do one of those things 3 times a week, what's it going to be? I swear to God, it'd be Optimyze. Because when I'm in there, and I might actually, I just felt like a wave of emotion come in, like my eyes fill up and I'm like, oh, this is truth. Not truth, but this is how I honestly feel in a really real way. When I'm in there, when I'm in the cold, it's sometimes like right now I hurt my ankle. I'm going to go do the cold to treat my ankle.
Sure.
But usually it's because I'm ready to be a more patient father. I'm ready to be a more present lover to my wife. And when I'm sitting in that cold, that's the work I'm doing. And that becomes like the most important thing for me, to have that. So thank you guys for bringing this to us and for having that. And I know you can do cold anywhere, but you've created a community where I feel safe to do there, where I can talk with other like-minded people. And I get to do that work because, it can be a physical thing. It is very much so. But for me, it's so much about the mental and emotional parts of like, if I can sit in this cold for 3 minutes, I can sit and hold my son when he's having a tantrum. I can sit and listen to my wife when she's telling me a story. So
thank you for sharing it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we built this place and we had no idea like what effect it really was going to have. And we had an idea in a sense of what it did for us, but we don't know how to translate to other people. And if you build it, they will come. And so many wonderful people have really just showed up and became part of that community. And it's like one of my favorite places to hang out. When I'm at my house and I'm working here from the computer and I have to go into the center to go see how things are going, like that always puts a smile on my face. And I'm always happy to go there because of people like you who are there doing their practice. Our team is just amazing. And then, of course, the therapies are so powerful. Like, who would have known that cold water is like this stern but righteous teacher that exists?
Like another medicine we know, huh?
Yes, exactly. And it's right there in front of our face our entire life. And we basically stayed away from it because of fear. Because who the hell wants to get into cold water or a cold lake or a cold shower? There's just no room for that. And then you go... And then you learn this practice, and then it becomes one of like your staple things that just really help to ground you. And it really helps with the busy mind. I see a lot of people coming in and out of the center, of course, a lot of different challenges that people are looking to overcome, some serious medical issues, some things that people aren't really ready to talk about, and some things that people are pretty open and ready to talk about. Hey, I'm super anxious, so I get depression or ADHD and all these different terms that are out there. And that cold water can take a busy mind and just silence it.
Bring you back to the present.
Yeah,
like
because
else,
being
right?
present is not easy, and it's sure the hell not easy for me. That's for sure. I've had a busy mind. I'm extremely mental in the sense that I process a lot of things from my mind. I have a strong mind, and it's like a beauty and a blessing and a huge obstacle for my entire life. So my first cold plunge
Same.
was like, this is it. This is something that I'm going to be doing often. And it's funny that we've been able to create an entire business model around it. It's been an interesting journey.
I love that you said that presence is so challenging, because it is for so many of us. And the irony in that is the only time we're in absolute state of peace is when we're in the present moment. Because if we're in, depression comes from our past.
Yes.
That's us living in our past. And anxiety and fear and worry is what? The future.
Anticipation.
So the only place where we are absolutely at peace is in the present moment. Yet, for some reason, we choose to be challenged. We choose to make it a very challenging thing to be in, which is like, oh, I want peace in my life. Okay, be present. That's it. That's all it takes. Just be present with it, whatever your it is in that moment. Yet, we go back into our memories, we go back into our past, we think about how things were, or we're so worried or concerned or excited about the future, then the peace doesn't exist. I always say, fear is not here. Fear is not here. And in my coaching program, I call it EPIC, Empowered Presence, Intentional Creation. One of our main things is we navigate the 6 major emotions, and fear being one of them. Fear is the future. If you're not in thinking about the future at all, fear does not exist. And you're like, whoa, that scary ghost under the bed actually isn't real, because the future isn't real. And easy said, I
the
have a good spiel
of
about
anything,
it,
yes.
right? Yet I still have fears and worries just like everyone else.
I mean, how many times have we anticipated how something may turn out and spent so much mental energy of how it may turn out? And then when you get to the day and you wake up the next day and you talk through it or have a conversation, you realize, wow, that wasn't so bad. I spent a whole night of like no sleep and tossing and turning over anticipation of that.
Something that may or may not ever happen.
May or may not ever happen. That's a weird human. It's just a weird human phenomenon that it's really interesting why we do that so much. And that's probably cultural too. I think it's a Western thing. I think
Yeah, for sure.
I think Westerners are very mental. When I notice about European culture, it's very much they process things from the mental aspect. And of course, the British came here into North America and brought obviously their culture, their thinking, and all of that. And you look at other cultures, they're more in their body. And not to say one's better than the other. I like to seek balance in all things. But yeah, it's just a funny thing, the communication. Even Latin American culture is just so much more self-expressive, so much more in their body. They're willing to get up and dance and self-express, and they don't have that shyness that we tend to have here in the North, which I think a lot of that comes from the British and their influence here in the States.
The colonizers, man. Yeah, it's for sure. And it's funny, like you mentioned, like the physical, it seems like the physical was left out of, especially in religion, of our mainstream, monotheistic religions, where it's like they just toss that out. The temple, the body being a temple, whatever, we're not going to focus on it. But you look at the native cultures, like the Native American cultures, they do dance as ritual.
Dance is big.
They do movement. So the movement is such an important piece, and I think that's why it's in my chart, it's in my astrology, it's in my who my DNA of who I'm meant to be, is to have some sort of movement practice and to bring the movement and to unite that with when the body and the mind meet and help optimize mind, body, breath. That is the old moniker for it, which is definitely a yoga mentality, or any type of mentality where it's like, let's bring it all together. Let's bring it all together where the mind and the body meet through the breath. And that's I think the missing piece and why physicality is so important, whether it's yoga or functional patterns or CrossFit or dance or whatever it is. Boxing and fighting has now become the one through a lot of the men's work that we do. But the physical is just such an important piece. And I think it's what other native cultures and our tribes people did. back in primal times.
Yeah, they would dance for weeks at a time during specific times of the year for
a couple
ceremonies.
Weeks ago, Sundance.
Sundance, yeah. And I just had a conversation with my friend Anthony Giannini earlier, and he's an anthropologist, and he's down in Peru, and he's studying in the Andes Mountains, and he was talking about some of their cultural ceremonial practices and dance. And then you go into African culture, dance, and you go into Asian culture, dance. And you go
in African fighting too.
And you go into Europe, it's dance, so that's an interesting thing. Dance is everywhere, but at some point, maybe with the rise of, the different religions, it kind of put a stop to a lot of the dancing for some reason.
For sure.
Not a lot of dancing going on. So what's next for you?
Cool.
You are still heavily involved in teaching, and then, of course, the Sacred Sons, which we spoke a lot about. But I'd like to talk a little bit about your coaching program.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So my coaching program, I'm doing it. I've had 2 cohorts of it, 2 groups go through my Epic Empowerment program. And what we do is it's an 8-week course where we dive into self-awareness, like exploring who we are, right? And then limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves. And then we move through mastering the emotions and then stepping into greater empowerment and greater embodiment. And it's a 4-week process that we do. I do it 1-to-1 with clients, and I also do it in a small group. I'll probably start my next small group cohort in the end of October, because I've got some big events coming up. My wife and I, we lead immersions. We moved away from the word retreat because we don't want people coming to get away from their life. We want people to immerse themselves into a life in a certain place where there's a lot of culture. So our next immersion or retreat, it's a movement and meditation. And we use the word movement, not just yoga, because we do more than yoga. We're doing it in Tulum, Mexico. I'm sure many people have been there. If you know, it's a great place to go to. If you've never been, I highly recommend. So we do different movement practices, different meditation practices, and we dive into the cultural practices. So we get into different ceremonies, cacao ceremony, Mayan mud bath. We'll get into a Temescal sweat lodge.
Nice.
And our retreats and our immersions, we actually ask our guests to not participate in any drugs or alcohol. We want them to be fully present for the experience and to really be more reverent with the practice. We know that may not be for everybody. Some people want to go and have a bunch of drinks on the beach, and we will be on the beach and we will have a lot of fun. But we're also going to really dive into movement, to the meditation, and to the Mayan culture. So that's happening Labor Day weekend, and we still have some spots available. You can just go to my website, antonyoga.com. And then Sacred Sons has several events coming up. We've got a weekend here in September. The weekend after that, September, I want to say 8th, 9th, and 10th and 11th. It's called an EMX. We're hosting it here in Prescott, Arizona, with Andrew Huvar, who you've had on the show, a brother of mine, incredible man, incredible leader. We're leading that in person, and also a guy named Nathan Collerman. He's going to be there, some other great brothers from town. And then Sacred Sons has several of those regionally, but we also have our Convergence, which is the big retreat, and that's going to be in North Carolina. And that is, let me check the calendar real quick, October 13th through the 16th, where there's going to be up to 500 men, including sons and fathers. So it's about generations, about bringing generations together.
What a
movement. Those people who are interested, check out sacredsons.com. Yeah.
What a movement. And it's really grown so fast in such a short period of time.
Crazy.
And it's touching a lot of different types of people, like you mentioned. It's really interesting to see. Prescott, Arizona, what an interesting place that is, too, for your upcoming event that you mentioned. I love that town. That's one of my favorite towns here in Arizona. Like, what a town of patriots, that's for sure, up there.
Yeah,
for sure. The last place you want to invade, that's for sure. I've been up there, and there's all these like retired special forces guys that just like happen to live up there. It's just like an interesting town that you would see in a movie. I love going up there every now and then. So that's awesome. You're up to so many great things. You're doing a lot of good work. Seems like you're living with purpose, leading by example, stepping into discomfort in so many different ways, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And you get to work with your beautiful wife. How is that? That's a rare experience. Not a lot of people obviously have that dynamic where they work with their wife and do these immersions. What's that experience been like?
Well, it's great because we have separate work, but it's the same work, and we do it separately as well. So she does tarot. She leads her courses in teaching women how to read tarot. Plus, she does tarot readings. She's an astrologer. She does astrology readings, and she's also part of an astrology program where she teaches people to become an astrologer. She has her own spiritual programs that she's involved with, that she leads. She coaches. My wife. This is funny. I said, if you're going to ever judge me on one thing, judge me by the women that I've had the privilege to marry. I've been married twice, and both women are incredible human beings. And my wife right now, Amy, she's incredible. I'm awestruck by her talents and her abilities. And yeah, we do the work together, and it's constant. We're constantly calling each other into presence, calling each other in, and showing each other where we can be better partners. And oftentimes that shows up when we're leading immersions and retreats, and it's just an opportunity for us to grow even closer. If maybe next time we'll share our story, our love story, and how it came to be. It was quite memorable, and it's a beautiful story. But yeah, I am beyond blessed, and not only do I get to do it with her, we take our kids everywhere we go.
That's
so our
awesome.
Kids go on every retreat. They've been on every retreat that we've led. We just got back from Crested Butte, Colorado, and we taught yoga classes and workshops up there, and the kids are with us. And that's how we do it. And
they get to learn and see you guys together, working together in harmony. I mean, there's so many good lessons that they're getting from that experience. So congratulations to both of you for creating that, because that's not easy to do. Most people, would have a hard time working in that capacity with a partner. And usually it's very separate. I'm over here, you do your thing, and we'll talk about it at night. So hats off to you.
Also, part of that is recognizing, because who she is and how intelligent and creative that she is, it's me being able to be like, whoa, it's time for me to step back a little bit. And then there's also moments when it's time for me to step in, and it's knowing that. And a lot of that is playing with the ego. The ego wants to be right all the time. And I always say the number one thing you can teach somebody in a relationship is it's better to be happy than to be right. Right. And if you can learn to be wrong, you just diffuse so much problems. And admitting that you were wrong is so a hard. Superpower.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
it's been the best thing.
And be authentic about it too, really.
Totally. My kids are like, you said this, or you did that. I'm like, oh, Daddy was wrong. And they're almost like, cool. You can be wrong. Yeah. Adults are wrong all the time. Daddy was wrong. Or even just hearing them say, your mom was right there. She's got a better idea. Hearing them, they're just kind of.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So admitting authentically that you're wrong is for sure a superpower. Not easy to do.
I like that piece, the authentic, because you could say you're wrong and underneath be like, but I know I'm right.
Yeah, fine. I'm wrong. You just want to move on to the next part and just
passive aggressive.
Yeah, just get over it. But deep down inside.
But to really be like, oh,
yeah,
that's a better way to get to the grocery store. You're right. Turning left is a smarter decision, and just owning it and be like, we got there faster. You're right.
I try to insert that authentic word into anything because it's just so easy. For sure. Authentically curious. Because you could be curious, but it could be very surface. But when you're really authentically curious, you really care. You really care to know. And people feel that. And people...
I do the same with the word intentional, right? Adding the word intentional. I'm intentionally doing this. I'm intentionally choosing this. Yeah.
I like that.
Cool, man. Hey, well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on here and
this is
part of the Optimyze family.
Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate you. Thanks for all the work that you're doing and sharing and being able to come on here and just be your vulnerable self. That alone is a powerful message for anybody who is watching this, who wants to really speak their truth, but might be holding back. So we're going to put in the notes, everybody, how to get in touch with Anton, how to connect with him on Instagram. So why don't you just put out some of the easiest ways to get a hold of you? Because I know you're very active on Instagram. Sure. Maybe start there.
Yeah, sort of active. Sovereign Yogi Dad is my Instagram handle. Somewhat active. I definitely post a lot of events on there. My website, antonyoga.com, and then sacredsons.com. Those are the three sites. Easy. 3 places to reach out and connect and find out what's going on.
Great. Very easy. Come to Optimyze in the afternoon, and you'll definitely see him there too as well. Not hard to find here in the Phoenix Valley. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you. I will see you at the center. And thank you, everyone, for listening in to our conversation with Anton Mackey, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.